Why is it so hard to set boundaries with your extended family at Christmas? I mean, you're an adult, you have your own family now, you get to make your own choices about how you spend the holidays. And yet, when it comes to actually saying something to your mum or dad about wanting to do things differently, maybe you freeze, your stomach tightens, your throat closes up. You end up feeling like a child again, worried about disappointing them or causing upset. And so maybe you say nothing, or you go along with what's expected, or you twist yourself into knots trying to keep everyone happy. But here's what most people don't realize. This isn't just about Christmas, and it's not really about your parents. There's a hidden pattern running underneath all of this, pattern that was created in your childhood and is still playing out in your adult life. And until you understand this pattern, you'll keep struggling with the same boundaries, the same guilt, the same internal conflict. I'm Emma, and I help anxious mums understand the psychology behind their patterns so they can break free and show up calm and confident for their children. Today, I want to show you exactly what this hidden pattern is and how to start changing it. Now, here's what's actually happening when you struggle to set boundaries with your parents. You're experiencing an internal conflict between two parts of yourself. There's the part of you that's still the child, the daughter who learned early on what was expected of her, who figured out how to keep the peace, who maybe took care of one of her parents' feelings or made sure everyone was okay. And then there's the part of you that's now the parent, the mum who has her own family, her own values, her own vision for how you want to raise your children and spend your time. And these two parts can often be in conflict. The child part says, I can't upset my mum. I need to keep the peace. What if she's disappointed in me? What if I hurt her feelings? And the parent part says, I want to do things differently. I want to create my own traditions. I want what's best for my family. And you end up getting stuck in the middle, paralyzed by this internal tug of war. Now, here's why this happens. When you were growing up, you learned certain patterns about relationships, about conflict, about what happens when you have needs or wants that differ from the people around you. Maybe you learned that keeping the peace was more important than speaking up. Maybe you learned that your role was to look after your mum's feelings. Maybe you learned that saying no or wanting something different meant you were being difficult or selfish. And these weren't conscious lessons. Nobody sat you down and said, your job is to make sure your mum's okay. But you absorbed these patterns through thousands of small interactions, through what was rewarded and what was discouraged, through what felt safe and what felt scary. And now, as an adult, these patterns are still running. This is what we call an intergenerational pattern, a way of relating that gets passed down, often unconsciously, from one generation to the next. Your parents did the best they could with what they knew and what they'd learned from their parents. This isn't about blame, but it is about awareness. Because until you become aware of these patterns within you, they'll keep running your life, especially around emotionally charged times like Christmas. Now, let me show you something else that's happening. When you feel that anxiety about setting a boundary with your parents, your nervous system kicks into a protective strategy that is basically designed to shield you from uncomfortable feelings. One of the most common protective strategies for anxious mums is people pleasing. And here's how it works. So setting a boundary with your parents brings up uncomfortable feelings, guilt, fear of rejection, anxiety about conflict, maybe even fear of losing their love or approval. Those feelings are painful, and your nervous system wants to avoid them. We don't want to feel pain. So instead of feeling those feelings and setting the boundary anyway, you people please. You go along with what's expected. You say yes when you want to say no. And in the short term, it works. You avoid the uncomfortable feelings, you keep the peace, everyone's happy. But in the long term, it might not actually work so well. Because if you end up feeling resentful or exhausted, then it's like you're living someone else's life instead of your own. And the thing is, your children can pick up on this. They sense your stress, your uncertainty, your lack of confidence in your own choices. So the people pleasing that feels like it's protecting you, it can sometimes actually be keeping you stuck. It's keeping you in the role of the child who has to keep everyone happy instead of stepping into the role of the adult parent who gets to make choices for her own family. And here's the thing, your parents don't actually need you to people please. I know it feels like they do. I know it feels like if you set a boundary, they'll be devastated or angry or disappointed. But what's often happening is that you are uncomfortable with their discomfort. You're trying to manage their feelings so you don't have to feel your own anxiety about their reaction. And that's okay, that's normal, that's understandable when you care about people. But when you can't tell where your feelings end and someone else's begin, when you start feeling responsible for managing other people's emotions, it's just exhausting. And there's another layer to this that I think you'll find really helpful to understand. So many people are talking about attachment styles, the way you learn to relate to your primary caregivers as a child. This has a huge impact on how easy or hard it is for you to set boundaries as an adult. If you grew up with parents who were emotionally available, who could handle you having different needs and feelings, and who gave you the message that you were loved even when you disagreed with them, then setting boundaries as an adult probably feels relatively safe. You trust that the relationship can handle it. But if you grew up with parents who were anxious or emotionally unavailable, or who withdrew love when you didn't meet their expectations, then setting boundaries can feel terrifying because on some level, you maybe have learned that love is conditional and relationships are fragile, and that if you upset someone, you might lose them. And so this can lead to a pattern of anxious attachment, constantly monitoring other people's feelings, trying to keep them happy, being afraid of rejection or abandonment. And I want you to understand, if you recognize any of this in yourself, this isn't your fault. You developed these patterns as a survival strategy. They helped you navigate your childhood relationships, and they worked. You're here, you survived, but they're not serving you anymore. Because now, as an adult and a parent, you need to be able to set boundaries. You need to be able to make choices that work for you and for your family, even if they disappoint someone else. And the beautiful thing is, you can learn new patterns. You can learn that relationships can handle disagreement, that love doesn't have to be conditional, and you can set a boundary and still be loved. But it starts with awareness, with understanding why this is so hard for you. Not so you can judge yourself or feel broken, but so that you can have compassion for yourself and start making different choices. Let me tell you about a mum I worked with who went through exactly this process. She'd always done Christmas with her parents. They were close and it was a special time. They had family traditions that had been created by her grandmother. But after having her first child, something shifted. She actually wanted to have her own special time with her husband and baby. She wanted to experience the magic of Christmas morning in her own home, just the three of them. But she felt terrible about it. She worried about rejecting her parents, especially her mum. And when we started working together, we explored what was underneath this worry. And what we uncovered was she had always been the child who kept the peace and looked after her mum. That was her role in the family. But now she was an adult and a mum in her own right, and she got to make her own choices. The problem was she felt deeply uncomfortable at the thought of confronting and upsetting her mum. But more importantly, and this was the real breakthrough, she felt scared about rejecting her mum's authority and claiming her own. This wasn't really about Christmas. It was about stepping into her own power as a mother, about saying, I'm not just your daughter anymore. I'm a mum now, and I get to decide how we do things. And this felt terrifying to her because on some level, it felt like she was rejecting her mum. But one day she came to our session and told me she'd actually shared her feelings with her mum. And yes, it had been difficult, but it had also been freeing. She suggested they could come over later on Christmas Day so she could enjoy the magic of Christmas morning with her husband and her 1-year-old first. And you know what? Her mum said yes. It wasn't easy. There were some uncomfortable feelings, but everyone survived. And more than that, it marked the beginning of a new relationship with her mum, but also with herself as a mother in her own right. And best of all, she got to make everyone happy after all with a little negotiation and compromise. But the key was that she made the choice. She claimed her authority. She stepped out of the role of the child who keeps the peace and into the role of the parent who makes decisions for her family, and that changed everything. So if you're struggling to set boundaries with your extended family this Christmas, if you feel that internal conflict between being the dutiful daughter and being the mum who gets to make her own choices, if you're people-pleasing to avoid uncomfortable feelings, I want you to know this is a pattern, and patterns can be changed. It starts with awareness, with understanding why this is so hard for you. And then it's about taking small steps, having the conversation, setting the boundary, tolerating the discomfort of someone else's disappointment. Because the reality is your children need you to be able to do this. They need you to be confident in your choices. They need you to model that it's okay to have needs and boundaries, and they need you to show them that love doesn't have to be conditional. And you can't do that if you're still stuck in the role of a child who has to keep everyone happy. Now, I know this is deep work, and it's not always easy to do on your own. And that's why I created the Calm Mum Reset. It's a collection of 5 therapeutically informed tools to help you let go of anxiety and stay grounded in what matters most and show up as the mum you want to be. And it won't solve your relationships with your parent, but it will help you stay focused on how you want to be with your children when everything else feels stressful. And it will help you keep your number one priority, your children, front and center, even when you're navigating difficult family dynamics. Check the description around this video and you'll find the link there. And if this video resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I share insights like this every week to help anxious mums understand the psychology behind their patterns and break free.